Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. Let's go live and talk about ponds and lakes. Have a good time. So it's been a month or so since we've done this show, and now it's time to go have a little fun and talk about it. Let's start off with some news. Dateline, North America, there's been widespread reports of an invasion coming across the borders with no respect to fences at all of that dreaded plant, filamentous algae. I've gotten about 5 or 6 phone calls and a big number of emails from Texas all the way up into Wyoming of filamentous algae. Got a phone call yesterday from a man in Texas who had been to the ranch about 10 days ago, and he'd seen just a little bit of filamentous algae growing around the edges of his pond, but then he came back last weekend and that stuff had exploded and covered over 10% of his pond, and he's afraid that it's going to be going on and on and on. Hello, John Moore, Kentucky. James Allen from Kentucky. Good to see you guys. Jim, I got your emails. I don't think I responded, but I'm around the computer all day tomorrow. But we're talking about the news right now. So what do we do about filamentous algae, folks? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is once you see you've got that problem, pour a couple of fingers of your favorite beverage, in this case, Angel's Envy. Be sure you can chase it with some water on ice. And then contemplate what you need to do. Hello, Jason Foley. So, you have several choices. One, you can just let it run its course. Well, now what that means is if you've got real crystal clear water, then you're going to expect a whole lot more algae to grow a lot faster. Now, where I would tell people just to let it go is going to be in small ponds you don't use a lot, or if you got a brand new pond that doesn't have a lot of fish in it. And I've gotten several calls and emails the last few days from that case right there. So the choice is to either go ahead and knock it out and see if you can convert those nutrients back into solution to where you can create a plankton bloom. Now, filamentous algae comes because of rise and fall of temperature in the springtime. It's actually a cool water plant. It likes cooler temperatures, most of the ones that we're seeing right now. So it has a tendency to grow itself out and go away by about the end of May. Now, if you want to go ahead and knock it out, there's a number of approved algicides that you can choose from. Just follow the label or hire somebody to do it. Now, if you've got ponds and it's a fish in your ponds and it's a mature pond, you sure want somebody that knows what they're doing to do it for you, unless you're really good at it. You don't want to knock it all out at once. That would not be fun. Look at there. There's Neil Vaillant from South Louisiana. Mike Cottrell from Palapena County. Good to see you guys. So, filamentous algae has been a scourge lately and doesn't honor any boundaries. Border Patrol can't do anything about it, but here it comes right at you. So, be ready to deal with it or let it go through. Now, here's a little tip. This is a pro tip. I can't tell you how many times somebody said, hey, I've got algae growing and I want to knock it out. We have the conversation how to knock it out with an approved algicide. Go to aquaplant.tamu.edu, and then you can see some of the different options you've got on how to deal with algae. Biologically, tilapia will eat it. They don't do it fast. You may need to knock some of it out with a herbicide before you go much further, but there's several options you can choose to deal with it. So I just got a call, so that's distracting me a little bit, but we're going to ignore that and move on. The other choices are to just let it go and let it grow itself out. So that's what I'm going to tell you about filamentous algae. In other news, there's right now there's a mass exodus of mom and pop fish farmers. As my career has grown, I've had the privilege to be able to work with a number of mom and pop fish farmers that grew sport fish. 2 or 3 of them in Oklahoma, a couple in Arkansas. There's all over this nation there are small fish farms that have helped supply local areas with stocking fish for your ponds and lakes. Well, those fish farms are now fading away. The people are outgrowing them. They're aging out, and no succession plan. So what that does is that puts the burden on some of the larger fish farms, especially in Arkansas, to grow enough fish to support the entire industry, which is expanding at a pretty fast rate. More ponds are being built, more fish are being needed, and there's not a supply chain issue, there is a supply issue. So take my word for it, if you need to order fish, you better get it done because supplies are beginning to dwindle already. I've got some fish ordered all the way from back in March and they still haven't been delivered. And I don't quite understand that problem, but I know this. Part of it is due to the supply being gone. Hello, Mindy Smith. Jason Foley knows the real. That's right. Hey, I'm glad you reminded me. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and whatever other paraphernalia or swag we've got lined up at the office. And that Leanne will take care of. I meant to call her today and do a drawing. I forgot. That's on me. So for the next one in June, I promise you we'll do a drawing and somebody will win a hat and some other swag. Speaking of gimme stuff, some time back we published this little brochure on feeding fish. So if you'd like to have some tips on feeding fish, there it is right there. Just send an email to info@pondboss.com. Tell us you'd like to have the brochure on feeding fish. And if you want a sample copy of the magazine Pond Boss, we can do that too. Mine came in the mail. I like that. Be on the subscriber list so I can see how long it takes for the post office to do their job. We've also got a pretty good number of resource guides for 2023. The resource guide is loaded up with vendors and suppliers to the industry. And you can sure go through it and see lots of stuff in there. This is free. So if you guys, gals, want any of this stuff, just let us know and we'll take care of it for you. So let's start hopping into some questions. In order to answer some, you got to ask some. So I know Jason Foley will have a question. Let's bring it on. Robert Buckaloo, good to see you, buddy. One of the questions I've been receiving lately is, hey, fathead minnows are in short supply, so can I substitute golden shiners? Well, no, not really. They serve different purposes. Now, if that's the only choice you got, maybe so. But here's the reality of that deal. Fathead minnows, and then I guess the take-home point for this little communication until you guys start throwing some questions at me is each species of fish serves a specific purpose in your pond. So you need to know that. Fathead minnows, for example, their job is to be used in a brand new pond that has no fish in it with some substrate so they can stick their eggs and begin to reproduce and fill the pond up with a bunch of baby minnows. And the primary job is to support the first year and a half growth of newly stocked largemouth bass or even smallmouth bass, depending on what your latitude is and the kinds of fish you're going to stock. Now, when fathead minnows are stocked, it's typically stocked in conjunction with bluegills. Bluegills, especially in the south, reproduce 4 or 5 times a year, so they're the backbone of the food chain for bass fishing lakes. Now, as we go further north, where smallmouth are a little bit more preferred, bluegill are less preferred, pumpkin seeds are more preferred. So you pick out the species of fish, but going back to that question, fathead minnows' job is to reproduce over and over and over, to provide food for the first year and a half's growth of newly stocked largemouth bass. Golden shiners are typically a supplemental fish stock that spawn once a year on grassy substrates. They're predator fish limited by their mouth size. So they can also be nest raiders when they get to be 4 or 5 inches long, even 6 inches long. The biggest shiners I've ever seen are maybe 7 inches. So that's quite a few. You know, that size, they get pretty big. It's hard for bass to control them. Let's see here. We got 17 viewers, 14 comments, 4 likes. So let's kind of step that up a notch. I know doing it once a month is probably not that much helpful. Let's see, Jason Dodd, good to see you. Jim Allen, we've been feeding our table scraps to the fish to extend the pellet supply. They like anything other than turkey. You know, it depends on what kind of fish. I mean, the different species of fish will eat different types of food. You know, there's like around some of the fishing docks and around like Lake Texoma and places like that. Well, heck, I mean, this is the case everywhere, where the guides come in and they'll fillet fish and throw the carcasses in the lake. There's always some fish down there to pick up the pieces, like channel catfish and even some blue catfish, depending on what lake it is. So feeding your table scraps, now, Jim, you can get away with it because you live on a pretty big lake. But if somebody lives on a small pond, I wouldn't feed the table scraps. I would grind them up and put them in the garden or do something else. So that's my comment about that. Drew Bachman from South Carolina. Good to see you, buddy. Jason Don looking for smallmouth bass. Who has them available? Depends on where you are. If you are like in the Illinois area, I would call and talk to Herman Brothers. Talk to Nate Herman and see what he's got. And if you're in Missouri, for example, Nemo Fisheries sometimes has them. Depends on where you are. So let's see, Mike Fornash in Southeast Iowa. Yep, been there. Jason, so looking for smallmouth bass, I would check in with your extension service and see if they have a list of private fish suppliers. That can tell you how to do it. Tyler Markley. Hey, Bob, I contacted Hartley Fish Farm in Kingman and am getting some bluegill and hybrid bluegill to stock in my pond that's loaded with big bass, crappie, and catfish. Hartley is great to work with. Thank you, sir. I called and talked to Billy today. I got to tell you, Hartley Fish Farm, the first time I worked with Hartley Fish Farms was, I think, the spring or fall of 1981. Woo, I was just a puppy. And I got to meet Bus Hartley. And Bus Hartley was, well, he didn't get the credit he deserved. Bus Hartley was the guy that figured out how to get channel catfish to reproduce in a laboratory condition, which maybe not so much a lab, but he figured out how to get catfish to spawn, how to hatch the eggs, and over a series of years, he figured out what they would eat so you could start to reproduce channel catfish. He did that in the 50s. And then in the 60s, he perfected that, and then his techniques were shared and then spread along a burgeoning industry that was to become the catfish industry. So this whole fish industry is not that old. You know, the catfish industry tracks back to the 60s. The bait fish industry tracks back to the late 40s and early 50s. You know, and the sport fish industry didn't really get its foothold until we got into the early to mid 80s. So I've been alive for a bunch of this stuff and watching how it worked. But Bus Hartley, he was probably 65 when I met him, and I learned more about how to handle fish behavior, fish production from that guy than I did anything I took in college, because he'd been there, done that, and he was very kind. And then he had 3 sons and a daughter, and 2 of the sons have carried on the fish farm, and Bill's one of them. And I got to talk to Bill, and heck, I remember back then Bill was probably in junior high school maybe, and now he's got way more gray hair than I do. So, but he's the Hartleys are honest, hardworking, good folks. So, Tyler, you made a good choice. You bet. Jason Foley, yes sir. If Dustin's Lake fills up this spring, will we have trouble getting fish? Go ahead and order. He's already ordered his fish, Jason. So we've gotten him taken care of. The bass are not going to be the issue. Fathead minnows and bluegills right now are the fish that are declining in number and volume, and red ear sunfish. So those supplies look like they're going to dwindle. Fathead minnows are already gone, and it's going to be mid-June or early July before the new crop is beginning to get big enough that they'll start selling some of those. So Dustin's okay. His fish have been on order, and those have been secured. He's been on the books now probably for 6 months. Robert Buckaloo, should I fertilize my 3-acre lake when a large amount of water passes through after major rains? There's a 100-acre lake above me. Christopher Aguilar wants to know what's up, homie. I guess you're eating some boudin. I'm sipping bourbon. Just a little, not much, just a little. Angel's Envy, introduced to me by longtime friend Pat Hughes, and he bought it because it was in a nice bottle and heard good things about it. So, should you fertilize your 3-acre lake when a large amount of water passes through after major rains? The fact that there's a 100-acre lake above you isn't relevant to the point of whether you should fertilize or not. It's relevant to how much water flows into your lake. if that 100-acre lake drops and you get a big rain, it's going to capture a bunch of water and release it more slowly to you. The way you decide whether or not you should fertilize your 3-acre lake is the visibility. Now, this is after a rainfall. This is during a rainfall. This is anytime. If you're thinking about fertilizing your lake, first thing you need to do is measure the visibility. How far down can you see in the water? And I would measure that. Buy a Setchi disc. They don't cost that much money, and it's the second most useful tool that you can have for your pond. Somebody says, what's first? A thermometer. Everything biological that's going to happen is triggered by temperature with other variables. But without the temperature, it ain't going to happen. So, check the visibility. If your visibility is in excess of 36 inches this time of year, here we are in the early part of May. I guess this is May the 10th, so we're in the second week of May. So if your visibility is greater than 36 inches, then consider fertilizing. If the visibility is less than that, now let me tell you how to do the visibility. A Setchi disc is a 12-inch square or a 15-inch square with a cross painted in it, and 2 of the quadrants, opposing quadrants, are painted black. The other 2 are left white. So you lower that down on a cord, and you're measuring how far down it goes before it disappears. Now, when it disappears, you're watching it, then raise it up just high enough that you can look down there and see it. And when it appears, that's your visibility depth. So if you can see 36 inches or greater right now, then consider fertilization. And that's something else that's in short supply. I'm not quite sure what's going on. I've heard that a lot of the fertilizer is made overseas and is either being withheld or has had supply chain issues. So look around. What you're looking for is in the south, you're looking for a high phosphorus fertilizer. Now, if you're in the Midwest or North, I'm going to tell you, don't necessarily think about fertilizing. Think it through. Talk to a pro before you do it, because there's consequences from just south of the Mason-Dixon line all the way to the Canadian border, and north of that, you've got consequences if you fertilize and get too heavy of a plankton bloom going and have that going into the winter. So this is primarily for people south of the Mason-Dixon line. So check your visibility. If it's 36 inches or greater, fertilize. If it's less than 36 inches, don't. If the water's turbid due to mud or siltation, let that stuff settle out. Remember, when you fertilize a pond, what you're doing is you're mixing fertilizer into the water column, and the mission is to get that fertilizer dissolved into the water so that microscopic plants can take it up to create an algae bloom and a plankton bloom that in turn feeds a zooplankton bloom to create the base of the food chain. So you're doing 2 things when you fertilize a pond. You're coloring the water to create the food chain for newly hatched fish. So in a perfect world, should have fertilized probably a month ago. But if not, you're still okay. And the second reason is to block the sunlight from penetrating to the bottom of the pond, which that puts off the growth of aquatic plants that are rooted in the mud. So plants, they got to have 3 things. They got to have sunlight, they got to have food, they got to have the right temperature. If they've got those 3 things, they're going to grow. You can't do much about the temperature. Can't do a lot about the food unless you go dig it out with a track hoe. So the other thing is sunlight penetration. So if you've got a plankton bloom where your visibility is 30 inches, that means anything below 30 inches, it's going to be tough for plants to grow there because the sunlight can't penetrate to it. So there you go. Jason Dodd, Wichita, Kansas. Yep. Jason, let's see. I think you and I have been talking. Have we? I don't remember. I've been talking to Jason in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm thinking it was, I don't remember your last name, buddy. Ryan Hull, are there any tips to decrease predation of F1s added to an existing bass lake? Let's see. Okay, yeah. Jason Dodd. Okay, Jason. Yeah, I want to tell you about Jason's story in a minute. Great story. So let me answer Ryan Hull. Any tips to decrease predation of F1s added to an existing bass lake? Be sure you've got vegetation. And I tell you, if I were going to add F1s, then there's several strategies. One is you can stock 6 to 8 inch ones. Oh, by the way, Jason, Hartley's will have some smallmouth in the fall. Okay, so going back to Ryan, if you're going to add like 6 to 8 inch F1s to an existing bass lake, then I would go cull as many 10 to 12 inch bass as you can from that existing bass lake, because the reason you'd be adding those fish is so you could increase the potential to grow some bigger fish. That's what you'd be doing. Okay, now if you're going to be just stocking some F1 fingerling bass, cull some bigger bass, but be sure that you've got some habitat that those fish can congregate to, the small bass when you stock them, so that they can have a place to congregate to at least for a few days until they get oriented. Now, here's the thing about that. If you're going to stock small F1 tiger bass, or whichever ones, if you're going to stock some F1 largemouth bass into an existing bass fishery, and let's say you stock them at $100 per acre. Well, they cost like $1.50 a piece, so you can spend $150 for an acre's worth of bass. If 90% of those get eaten, that means 10% didn't. So if you put 100, that means 10 of them did not get eaten. So if those 10 can live 2 or 3 years, then they've added to that population. So to answer your question, you need habitat, structure, cover for those fish to be able to hide in, aquatic plants, and you need to have a food chain for them. So be a good idea maybe to add a few shiners. That's a good place to add some golden shiners. So anyway, yep. All right, so let me see here. I want to go down and look at these other questions. I'm going to tell you Jason's story. This is a great story. Okay. Kevin Matney in Erie, Michigan. Angel's Envy's made right there in Louisville. Okay, yeah. I didn't know about that stuff until my friend Pat turned me on to it. It's good stuff. Well, hey, Tyler, and so is Jason. You need to get to know Jason. Let's see here. Oh, he says, hey, GTO. GTO, oh, he must be famous. Okay, well, I know he races, so I don't know enough about Jason Dodd yet, but I'm going to learn, looks like. Anyway, he got in touch with me. Jason got in touch with me, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or so, and said he'd been watching some of these videos, and he had actually sent me an email back in December asking for things to look for, was looking, getting ready to buy some land with a pond on it. So he was asking me for some tips, what to look for, and I don't remember what I told him, but he contacted me, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and said, hey, I found this piece of property, it's got like a 5-acre lake on it, and I need to know what fish to buy. So we had a conversation, and I said, I wouldn't buy any fish till I knew what was in it. So he sent me some pictures of a bass that he'd caught, and some little channel catfish and things like that, but he said, I have noticed that there's a few carp. Well, there goes a red flag right up my flagpole. Carp, huh? Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. So I said, really, you could try to money whip a fishery like that, and it might work and it might not, but you could spend $2,000 or $3,000 and end up nowhere. So my recommendation was to let's see if you can find out what's in there, if you can find out the fish population. So my gut reaction was, who's around Wichita, Kansas that's got an electrofishing boat, for $1,500 could go out there and find out what he had. Well, I don't know anybody around there that's got an electrofishing boat, but I did remember a retired Kansas fisheries biologist who did some fantastic things around Wichita in the urban fishing lakes and created a program for catfish primarily, and really built a name for himself. Honest, great guy. He's in his mid to late 70s now. Leonard Yark is his name, J-I-R-A-K. And I got to meet Leonard. He came to one of the Pond Boss conferences a long, long, long time ago, back probably 15, 16 years ago. So Jason got in touch with Leonard. Leonard came out the next day, looked things over and said, you know what? You need to kill all these fish. Well, there are 3 neighbors around that lake. So Jason can chime in on the politics a little bit, but one guy was opposed to killing the fish because he thought there were a lot of good fish in there. And now, if you really want to hear all the details of this story, it's going to be in the July-August issue of Pond Boss Magazine. This is a real-world, honest-to-gosh, true story of superb decision-making on Jason's part to go from where a lake is unknown to set the stage to make it a great fishing lake in short order. So when Leonard came out and charged him very reasonable fees, matter of fact, absurdly cheap fees, and I'm in that business. So and his recommendation was to kill all the fish and start over. So just within a few days, like I think it was last Friday or a week, I don't remember, a week 10 days ago, Leonard came out with a hand and roped on the lake and killed the fish, and you would not believe the pictures. Those pictures are going to be in Pond Boss of the numbers of shad, gizzard shad, carp, stunted crappie, and in that 4 or 5 acre lake, there were a total of 2 bass pushing 7 pounds. There was a 45-pound flathead catfish, oodles of little bitty stunted crappie about that long, very few small bass, a handful of bluegills, but in terms of weight, I bet you 95, 96% of the weight was tied up in gizzard shad and in carp. So they killed those fish, and the water was turbid. It was pretty murky. Now it was kind of a muddy green look. So here's what's going to be in part of this story I think is real important. It's the consequences, the byproducts, some of the cause and effect when you have a population of fish like that. Those fish had reproduced, grown, and had just taken over that pond, and people didn't really know it. I think Jason told me he started pitching out a little fish food. That's when he saw the carp coming up to eat some of his fish food. So when he wrote on the pond, just within a few days, the color of the pond changed. The turbidity settled out. It was left with a green look, and if you think about it, here's the question. Why do they call a gizzard shad a gizzard shad? I know. Jim is raising his hand because it has a gizzard. That's right. So gizzard shad have a mouth underneath their nose. Anytime a fish has a mouth underneath its face, it's a bottom feeder. So gizzard shad feed in real shallow water, and they just filter through the muck. They've got really long intestinal tracts. So they can ingest mud and whatever's in the mud. Then their digestive systems extract whatever is of nutritional value. Then they excrete the rest of the nutrients and dirt and muck and whatever that they don't need. Well, a lot of that stuff gets kicked up into the water column. The water gets muddy, and those nutrients get suspended, and they create a really dense algae bloom. And that's what they had going on, was a really dense algae bloom coupled with a heavy movement of those carp and shad to create turbidity from mud. So they have a mix of things. So then when all the fish were killed, the mud pretty much settled out, and now the water's fairly green, and I think today they stock fathead minnows. So here they are going from a really lousy lake they didn't know about, how bad it was, or whatever the circumstances were, to a fresh start of a newly renovated lake. Now, another benefit they had was the water, over with the drought they're having up there, they've had half an inch of rain like in the last 6 or 8 months. So there's not much runoff going on, so that lake has drawn down over the last couple of years, so the fish were concentrated and pretty easy to take out. So now it has a brand new stocking of fathead minnows with habitat in there to begin to reproduce so they can set the table for the food chain for the next line of stocking. So a deep bow at the waist and hats off to Jason Dodd, the GTO man, which I got to hear about that, for making, this is one of the best examples of not paying the dumb tax that I've seen in years. Because it would have been really easy for Jason to not call, get online, go to the University of Google, come up with enough knowledge, cherry picked, to say, you know what, I don't know what's there, I'm going to stock some bluegill and some bass and make things better. No, that's not what he did. He sought out some good advice, got good advice, found the right people, took the right action plan, and now within about 18 months or 2 years, they're going to be catching some really good fish. So kudos to you, Jason Dodd. And Jason and I have been talking, and I'm asking him some questions and figuring out the storyline for Pond Boss, but that's going to make a really, really good story for Pond Boss. So let's see here. So we got Doug Cusick, Tyler Markley, and Jason Dodd all around the Wichita area. Okay, let's see here. Christopher just got the, hey, so did I. I just got the magazine too. So here we go. Let's do commercial at 7 o'clock. Pond Boss magazine, $35 a year. Here's what I tell everybody. Jason Dodd, I don't know that I've told you this. I know you subscribed because I saw it come across my desk. $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. And I promise you, there's nuggets in each one of these issues of Pond Boss that's going to help you be a better steward of your land and your water. I mean, I got two guys that write about building ponds and lakes. I've got a wildlife biologist. Dan Van Skyke writes about wildlife management. We've got Birdman Mel from Missouri writes about attracting birds. Oh yeah, we talk about aquatic plants and fish management and water chemistry. Dr. Claude Boyd, the world's leading authority on water quality, water chemistry, water biology in the aquaculture industry, out of Auburn, Alabama, writes an article every issue of the magazine. So it's really solid. So subscribe to Pond Boss magazine. Also want to plug Texas Hunter feeders, Texas Hunter products. Go to TexasHunterProducts.com and take a look at what they've got. I've been working with those guys for probably 15 years now. I love their customer service. I love their products. Now, are they the least expensive? No, they're not. I don't want the least expensive. I want the best products for the value of the dollars that you spend. So those are excellent products, great customer service. If something goes wrong, they're right on it. You can call them and talk to them. It's not like if you go to a big box store and you buy a Moultrie feeder and something goes wrong, you can't go back to the big box store and have them fix it. You got to get in touch with Moultrie if they'll return your calls or answer your emails. Doesn't work like that at Texas Hunter. There's a human being that answers the phone and will give you answers. Purina Mills, I've been working with those guys since 1995. Love them. They've always been enthusiastic about creating better products for our industry. And they're the makers of the Aquamax products, Sportfish 500, 600, Aquamax MVP, Aquamax Largemouth. So, great company. And I also want to tell you about huntbirddog.com. Check that out. If you love to hunt, go check out huntbirddog.com. Now, huntbirddog.com was an idea about a year and a half ago, and it's my son's idea, Jonathan. And Jonathan is a dynamic go-getter. And he's created basically an Airbnb or a VRBO for hunting. He saw a niche, and he's filling the niche, and he's doing really, really well. So I'm pleased to have him as a sponsor and help him grow his business. So there's my commercials. Let's move on. Give me some more questions so we can extend this thing, make the hour fly by a little faster. Frank James, let's see here. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, I see. Doug Cusick, okay. Kevin, let's see. Kevin Matney's asking, who sells tiger bass up north? I don't know that you can get them up north in Michigan, and I'm not sure the state will let you have them. Because they've got Florida genetics, and some states it's not a good idea to bring exotic genetics like that into the state. So I don't know that it would be a wise idea. You might, I tell you what you do, call American Sportfish Hatchery in Montgomery, Alabama. I bet you they're up to speed on if they can ship tiger bass to Michigan or not. They're staying attuned. They have permits to do what they need to do, but they're the originators of tiger bass. And so everybody knows that tiger bass is an F1 cross between genetically selected northern strain largemouth bass and hand-selected genetic variations of Florida strain largemouth bass. So it's the first generation cross between those two subspecies of largemouth bass. And they seem to show the best genetic traits of both strains. Northern strain largemouth bass are faster growing and more aggressive, where the Florida strain bass are more finicky eaters, but they get a lot bigger. So when you put those two together, that first generation cross has been pretty popular in the last 25 or 30 years especially. Okay, so Ryan Hull added some golden shiners a couple of months ago in a little structure. Good. That's a good deal. Okay, so Tyler knows Jason. You used to have a GTO and roll around with Jason when he had a GTO. I'd love to sit around and sip some of this whiskey and hear those stories. That'd be really fun. Frank James from over near Shreveport, Louisiana. How long do hybrid striped bass typically live? 10 to 12 years, typically, Frank. So when you stock those things and you got them on feed, they grow faster pretty much than any other species of fish. I mean, you can get them to 10 or 12 pounds just within 3 or 4 or 5 years, depending on how much you feed with the right circumstances. But 10 to 12 years has been about the longest I've seen them live before they started to disappear. Yes, Tyler, we're going to start culling out smaller bass, crappie, and all the bullhead we can. Our pond is turbid also, and yes, carp. Well, you know what? You might be a candidate to talk to Jason Dodd now that he's a veteran of what to do about carp ponds. Little sip. Smooth. Deborah Corlew. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Good deal. Okay, let's see. Brian Lawrence. 2 acre body of water since the filamentous algae and bushy pondweed. Uh-oh, it jumped. It started growing. My water clarity went over 40 inches. I do have 12 grass carp that tend to control over the growing season. Can I fertilize without causing the bushy pondweed to explode? Brian, I don't remember where you are, but I'm going to tell you this. You got 12 grass carp in a 2 acre pond. Oh, I know what I was going to tell everybody a while ago. This slipped by me, but there are cases when filamentous algae is growing on bushy pondweed or some of the other pondweeds, and if you kill that algae without taking out that bushy pondweed, then you're going to see an explosive amount of growth from the pondweed. Because when you take that algae off of the pondweed, it frees it to where it can grow. It gives it everything it needs, and the growth can be just amazingly fast. So now, here's what my answer is going to be to Brian. Here's what I would do. If your visibility is over 40 inches, and we're early in the season, here we are, May the 10th, I think it would be worth the risk in that situation because you have young growth of bushy pondweed with some algae growing on it. You have 12 grass carp that tend to control it. If you fertilize it, fertilize the main body of the pond away from the edges where the filamentous algae is growing. So if you use enough fertilizer for the entire pond and you concentrate it in about the middle, deepest 1/3 of the pond and mix that fertilizer really, really well, in this temperature, odds are good that you can create a plankton bloom right there over the next 4 or 5 days and let it expand out across the rest of the pond. And then if you can get visibility down under 30 inches, in that case, then you've got a home run. Hello, Matt Marsden. Good to see you, buddy. All the best to you. Look up American Fish Tree and you'll see who Matt Marsden is. He's an advertiser in Pond Boss. He's in the resource guide. So if you guys want a copy of this resource guide for 2023, just send an email to info@pondboss.com. Say you want a printed copy of the resource guide, or you can even just go to pondboss.com. Since I'm thinking about that, let's talk about that a minute. One of the resources that you have is pondboss.com. There's a lot of free articles. We've archived a bunch of audio podcasts. We've archived a bunch of links to these live broadcasts over the years. We've got Ask the Boss discussion forum that is now in its 22nd year. 250,000 posts in that thing. There's a lots of stuff. And the resource guide is online as well. So check it out, pondboss.com. Also, look at our YouTube page. It's called The Pond Boss on YouTube. And each week that I'm not doing a live broadcast, I've been uploading a short podcast that's topic driven. So if you go to the YouTube page, you can look at these podcasts. Plus, you can also look at some of the little vignettes. I've shot over the years a whole lot of little short, 30-second to 2-minute vignettes on a specific topic. When I'm in the field, if I see something and I've got Chico with me, then we'll video that topic, and then he'll put it together, edit it just a little bit, add a little fun music to it, and then I've been posting those. I've got, probably 7 or 8 of them up, and I've got another 25 or so to load. So keep paying attention to that, and please tell people about us. Help grow this audience. That's part of my retirement plan, is to grow an audience with this Pond Boss stuff, and it's part of my calling. My calling is to spread the word, to build a legacy, to help make you better stewards of your land and water. That's my God calling, to get out there and talk about this stuff and share it with you. The stuff I've learned over 42 plus years of doing this for a living, if I don't share it, shame on me. But it's good to build an audience. So Jim Allen, awesome article about aging fish in this. Yes, that's a really good article. So if you haven't, we've got some extra copies. So if you guys want to subscribe for $35 a year, this article, this magazine right here, I'm not going to open this one because it's mine, and I'm going to leave it in the plastic. But there's an article in here about aging fish that's really, really good. Hey, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. How long does that date last? How long does the aftermath of that date last? Okay. Let's see here. John Dyer, hanging out, waiting on the bigger rain they're promising. Yeah, you know what? I'm over here in Granbury along the Brazos River, and it's been spitting on us all day long, but it looks like there's more coming. Let's see here. Jim, what's the difference between Purina's Aquamax and game fish feed? I'll tell you about that. Let's see here. Blue Wing Outdoors. They see Doug Cusick has a pond management service and shock boat near Wichita. Well, good for him. Did not know that. Peyton is sick, but he's listening. Peyton's been running a fever the last few days. That ain't cool. We need to get Peyton well. He's got a lot of stuff to do. Latham Pugh. Hello, Pond Boss. What is your call on crawfish stocking in the spring? If you've got an established lake with plenty of bass, I would say stock crawfish. It's a good bang for the buck. You can buy them for $2 a pound, sometimes less, depending on where you are. Latham is over near Longview, so he can get them. But I like crawfish, and now if you're trying to establish crawfish, you got to have the right habitat, the right soils, the right food chain, or they won't take. The bass will eat them out. But if you want to stock them to feed your bass, that's a good thing too. Let's go back to Jim Allen's question. What's the difference between Purina's Aquamax and game fish chow? There's a big difference between those fish foods. Matter of fact, I got to spend a little time with one of Purina's reps. Margot Mansell was talking to me earlier this week, and she's going to do some training, dealer training, and she wanted to know about these different fish foods. Well, to give you the short story, because there's some pretty cool, matter of fact, I'm going to tell you one of the stories because it's pretty cool. I'm going to go back to 1995. That's when I joined in Pond Boss. I helped start Pond Boss in 1992 with Mark McDonald and helped him supply content, had an ad in the magazine, but then in 95, he wanted to get some help. So two other guys and I bought into Pond Boss. So we officially became owners at that time. First thing we did was write a letter to Purina Mills. We didn't have any national advertisers. So Mark didn't seem to think that since we had like 750 subscribers and there was only one outside the state of Texas, why would they want to advertise in that magazine? Well, I knew this. We didn't ask them. We wouldn't know. So we sent them a letter. And not only did they want to buy the inside front cover of Pond Boss magazine, which they've had since then, by the way, they wanted to do some things to help create some feeds for the industry. So a few weeks later, they were coming to the Purina plant in Fort Worth, Texas. So I invited them to come hang out with me and Walter Bassano at a ranch whose lake I managed just southwest of Fort Worth. So we went out to that ranch, about a 50-acre lake, and I'd been working on it since 1986. And there were some really big bass in it back then. And took them fishing. Well, they caught a few fish. They were kind of impressed. Not that much. Then we launched the electrofishing boat and put them in it. Went right back over the water where they were fishing, and we shocked up fish after fish after fish. One of them was double digits. So then they were amazed, and we went back and had a cookout. Next day, we went over to Glen Rose, Texas, which is just right up the road from where I live right now, with the Hammond's Barbecue, and we went in and sat down. We were eating ribs at a picnic table inside that barbecue joint, a butcher paper on top of the picnic tables, sawdust on the floor, and we're all talking. So we're eating ribs, piling the bones up, and Dr. Gordon Ballin looked at me and says, "Hey, Bob, we do want the inside front cover of Pond Boss, but better yet, what can we do to help create some products for the industry?" And I thought about it a minute, and I said, you know what? We're feeding different sizes of different species of fish in these recreational fishing ponds, but all we can buy is like your 32% catfish food. Its pellets are about that big. So if we want little fish to eat it, we got to soak it in water till it starts to fall apart or grind it up. Can you make pellets with different sizes in a fish food? Boy, they started looking at each other, started talking their language about extrusion and dyes and packaging and how to hold the feed together and all this kind of stuff. And 6 weeks later, I had a pallet of unmarked bags of fish food that became game fish chow. And to this day, that's their number one seller. And that all started like in 1995 or early 1996. Well, game fish chow is a grain-based fish food that you can use to supplementally feed the fish. And know that the different sizes of the fish are going to get nutrition. Purina's Aquamax lineup, especially the sport fish side, are fish meal-based products. So they're higher protein, more expensive, but they're designed for carnivorous fish, which bluegills are carnivorous fish, by the way, and hybrid stripers and fish like that. So the Aquamax sport fish products, 500, 600 MVP, largemouth, those are much higher protein, higher digestibility, fewer carbohydrates. You got to have carbohydrates or it won't be extruded, which means it won't float. So that fish food is designed more for predator fish and fish that are carnivorous. So that's the difference. So if you want to grow bigger fish faster, feed the Aquamax sport fish products. If you want to supplement the fish, or if you're feeding catfish or tilapia or fish that don't need the higher nutrition, then feed game fish chow. So there you go. Well, Peyton, I was going to ring you in the morning, see how you're doing. Sounds like you're got a thermometer stuck in your mouth. So, Deborah Corlew, last year we typically caught over a dozen bullheads every time we fished. We tried to thin them out. We also had extremely low water where half our pond was dry. This year we haven't caught a single one. Could they have winter killed? Probably not. They probably did not winter kill. They're notorious for sticking their heads down in the mud, and all they need is just enough oxygen to keep their metabolism going. And they can, believe it or not, absorb enough oxygen through their skin that they can stay alive. They don't even necessarily have to breathe. It's better if they can breathe for them. But one thing, if you're continually culling them, and you've got, when the pond draws down and there's a pretty good number of predator fish, what happens is the big fish just go on a frenzy and feed on those smaller fish. So odds are high that your predator fish have thinned out their numbers. Now, when it rains and fills your pond back up, then what that means is those fish are going to want to reproduce even more. So and that's the way nature works. When a pond goes down, the fish adjust their numbers. When the pond fills back up, you have highly successful spawns, and the fish replenish those zones